What's going on, y'all? It's your boy No Credit, and I'm back again with another one. I need you guys to do me a favor, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification icon for more videos like this. That being said, let's get into it. So NAOYA, he came to the States to watch Shushu Carrington fight. A future fight is being built for Shushu Carrington versus NAOYA, which is a ridiculous fight right now, in my opinion. I'm not saying Shushu can't win, but I just think it's just a little premature for him. I think he needs to become a world champion, become a unified champion. He needs to do a little bit more before they put him in there with INOUE. I think they're rushing this kid's career. INOUE is 31 years old. He's almost on his way out. Shushu is 26. He needs to not rush his career. He has to be a world champion first before he fights INOUE. Anyway, I just want to talk on what INOUE had to say about Terence Crawford. So INOUE was asked about the pound-for-pound list, see if he believes he's the number one pound-for-pound fighter in the world. And INOUE, he says, I think it's important to recognize me. He said, I think it's important to recognize myself as the best, but Terence Crawford win over Errol Spence is something I was very impressed with. So pretty much the guy that ESPN and Ring Magazine is saying he's the number one pound for pound because of activity is saying the complete opposite himself. He was like, yeah, you guys can call me the best, but the best is Terence Crawford because he fought a better competition, a top 3 pound for pound talent. I haven't fought a pound for pound talent yet. His win over Errol Spence, how one-sided it was, it literally gives him that number one spot because it was clearly the fight of the decade, kind of like a Floyd Mayweather versus Manny Pacquiao. That was built as the fight of the decade, the perfect fight. 2 undefeated fighters putting up their all on the line. One guy, a unified champion. One guy, 3-division world champion, former undisputed champion. Both guys practically in their prime. The best fight you can make on paper, and one guy just goes in there in a fight that's supposed to be regarded as a 50-50 fight. One guy just go in there and dominate the other guy in a one-sided fight. Yeah, that's impressive. So INOUE himself is shell-shocked. He's like, man, how can y'all put me number one over a guy like that if he goes in there and do that to a guy like Errol Spence Jr.? Nobody has ever done that to Errol Spence Jr. No matter what y'all want to say, y'all could say, oh, he was damaged goods from the car accident. How come nobody did that to him then? Nobody ever did that to him. He remained undefeated until he fought Bud. Nobody was able to do that to Errol Spence. Y'all could say whatever y'all want. He was wagering. Why nobody did it to him before then? Because he been saying he couldn't make the weight. For years he said he couldn't make the weight. He'd been talking about moving up to 154, but he said, I'm not moving up until after my undisputed fight. So it's nobody's fault. He wanted to be undisputed at 147. He said, I want to be the undisputed welterweight champion of the world. That was Errol Spence's goal at one time, but then he backtracked it. One time I seen him do another interview. I believe he did that interview with Sean Patel where he told Sean Patel, listen, undisputed is great, but even if I don't become undisputed, it don't matter because Floyd Mayweather wasn't undisputed. Felix Trinidad wasn't undisputed. Oscar De La Hoya wasn't undisputed. He literally turned to a historian when it came to the Terence Crawford fight. He was like, whether or not I become undisputed or not, it's not going to damage my legacy. Like, he turned to a historian. But anyway, moving forward, the fact that NAOYA INOUE, after everybody keeps trying to crown him number one pound for pound, is saying, no, it's not me, it's Crawford. What he did and the body of work he did that to, he deserved that number one spot. He said, I appreciate the respect, but a respect must be given to the true pound for pound in the sport, and that's Terence Bud Crawford. It just makes these boxing channels and these boxing experts look ridiculous because they're saying Inoue's number one. Inoue himself is saying, no, I'm not number one. I could fight 10 times, but Crawford could fight one time, and that fight could be way more impressive than me fighting 10 times in a year. So you could say, I'm number one because my activity, but I'm telling y'all, I'm literally telling y'all who are telling me that I'm number one, that the real number one is Terence Crawford because of his body of work that he's doing to a pound-for-pound talent just like himself. So I have to give him his props. So shout out to INOUE for giving Terence Crawford his props. It takes a lot of courage. INOUE himself said, I would love to label myself as the best, but real recognize real. I must give credit where credit is due. So I bet it was probably one of the hardest things for INOUE to do, because every fighter should believe they're the best, especially based off of their body of work. But INOUE knows boxing. He knows that Crawford has fought better competition than him. He knows that. He's become a 2-time undisputed. Crawford was the first to do it. But he knows that. He knows his body of work doesn't compare to Bud. It's the fans that are the problem. It's not a guy like INOUE who is humble, who's going to tell you like it is. It's the fans that are the problem. It's the fans trying to put a battery in the guy back and put him above somebody who he gives respect to. They disrespect the guy that the guy they want to put above him is giving respect to. That says a lot. That says a lot. Your favorite fighter, you hate. You don't like Bud, but your favorite fighter likes Bud. That says a lot about your character. Clearly, you need help. How do your favorite fighter rate a guy you disrespect over himself? Do that make sense to y'all? Do that make sense? That means your favorite fighter is literally telling you, you don't know shit about boxing. That's what INOUE is telling a lot of you boxing fans that come on my comment section and argue with me. Y'all come in my comment section and talk shit to me every day. When I do these videos and I talk about who's the true number one pound for pound in the sport, you guys say, man, you don't know shit about boxing. INOUE is number one because of his activity. And I tell you, activity doesn't matter. INOUE only has 27 fights. Crawford has more knockouts than INOUE has fights. Crawford has 31 knockouts. Well, 40 fights. Will INOUE, at the age of 31, ever even reach to 40 fights? Y'all talking about activity, but at 31, do you think, at the age of 31, do you think INOUE being 27-0, will he ever reach to 40 fights? We don't know that. How many fights he has to fight in a year to reach to that 40 fight? Crawford has more knockouts than the man has fights. He needs 4 more fights to equal the amount of knockouts that Terence Crawford has. 4 more fights. By the time he gets those 4 fights, how old will he be? 33? Like, come on, bro. You guys got to understand that INOUE, he knows boxing. He's trying to educate his fans on the sport of boxing. His fans are the one who is trying to put this jacket on his back and trying to put him above somebody who deserved the spot more than him. And he knows that. He knows that. He didn't have to say Crawford's number one. That's his personal opinion. He could have kept that to himself. He could have ride the wave, but he knew in his gut, in his conscience, that, listen, I would be lying to myself if I told you, he even said that, if I told you that I was number one. I would love to consider myself the best. But what Crawford has done, we cannot take that away from him. We cannot. And this is what boxing fans need to understand. What Crawford has done, you cannot take that away from him. That fight versus Errol Spence, It may have pissed you off. You may have lost money. And you want to find all these excuses in the world. But you cannot discredit Crawford from that fight. Because that fight was built as a true 50-50 fight in a sport. Where top 3 pound-for-pound fighters. 2 guys in the top 3, bro. That's never happened in the history of the sport. Where 2 guys are in the top 3 of the pound-for-pound rankings. And they fight each other. Crawford, number 1 at the time. Errol Spence, like number 3. And they fight each other. The number 1 guy showed that he is number 1 to solidify his spot at number 1. And then after he wins the fight, you want to take that number 1 spot away from him only because he won the fight in dominant fashion? How does that make any sense, guys? How does that make any sense? How can you take the fight away from Bud Crawford all because he won the fight in dominant fashion? How? How does that make sense? How does that make sense? How can you take the fight away from Bud? How can you take his number 1 pound for pound away from him? All because he did what he had to do and Errol Spence didn't do what he had to do. He didn't show up. He had no answers for Bud. Bud was just doing his job. He did what he had to do to win. And Earl just never showed up. And Earl even ducked the rematch. So, much respect to INOUE for giving credit where credit is deserved.